So I've covered all of the positives around Daygame. I haven't actually made a video talking about the negatives, the things that are the problems with Daygame. There's problems with all types of dating, and when we think about it in simplistic terms, we talk about really 3 or 4. There's online, there's day game, there's night game, and rarely, but sometimes people talk about social circle. It's rare because it's not a very common or the threshold, the barrier to entry is a little bit higher for social circle. But day game, what are the problems with day game? I'm going to cover just a few of them. Some of you guys are already aware of, but before we kick it off, actually, I'm Dave, and this channel is dedicated to giving you no BS, novel dating advice for the modern man. Top link in the description to check out my website and sign up to do some cold approach coaching with myself. This is designed really for single men that are looking to arguably find a serious relationship, and guys become serious when they find girls that are above their mate value and highly desirable, and Daygame is the superior method to do so. So that's why a lot of guys sign up to do coaching with myself. So I'm waiting for my next flight. I'm off to do another immersion with a client, and I thought I'd pump out a quick little video talking about the negatives of Daygame. Now, the most obvious ones are, once you become proficient at Daygame, which does take quite a long time, and you become quite good at running through all of the strategies that work during Daygame, your main issues will be getting in to as many cold approaches as possible, Daygame approaches as you possibly could get into, in a covert and calibrated way without blowing out the areas. These are the main issues that you're going to deal with. I've got a whole bunch of guys that just arrived. I got distracted. But getting in, you don't want to be burning down areas. So I teach guys to be covert, invisible. You don't want to burn down areas. You don't want to get banned from an area, and you don't want to be kicked out. You don't want to return to an area and have staff in that area or security come over and tell you to leave. So you have to be covert, you have to be invisible, definitely. And getting enough sets in is one of the biggest issues. Because if you're being covert, you're being invisible, you're constantly trying to avoid burning it down, then it's hard to do or get enough volume in. So this is one major issue that night gamers don't have. You get in there in the nightclub and you burn it down, you approach everything, and it's totally acceptable too. There's alcohol involved, and men are supposed to be approaching in the nightclub, so you can get a large amount of volume in a short period of time, the same as online. You can hack it and put yourself in front of as many people as possible, as many girls as possible, but with Daygame it's limited. So this is one of the major downsides. You have limited access, limited amount of sets. It's something that you're limited amount of volume, and it's something that you are constantly battling with. How far should I push it? I need to get more volume in. I need to get more approaches in. That's one of the main ones. Once you become good, if you're bad and uncalibrated, you can pump out as many approaches as you want. You end up getting banned and making a fool of yourself, and eventually in your local area you run out of places to approach, and then you end up online anyway because you won't be able to do it anymore. So that's one of the main ones. The second one is, because of the lack of volume, because it's during the daytime, it can take a few weeks for some of your Daygame approaches, going through the text game, making sure that you set up a date, and then pulling. It can be quite slow, and there's this it's slow because of the reason, one of the reasons is simply because in a nightclub girls are fully aware of what's going on. They're there to meet a guy. Not always, but a lot of the time if a guy approaches them in the nightclub, they're aware that it's more of a dating thing, it's not a friendship thing. But during the daytime, girls aren't necessarily aware. You could be very indirect and she's not aware that this is a cold approach to date. So it can take a little bit of time and be a little bit slow. These are the two major issues, I would say, with Daygame. Hopefully you can hear me okay. It's really loud. But anyway, these are the main two issues. Not getting enough volume in, and it can be very slow. There's a lot of upsides to that as well, which I've covered, but I just wanted to cover the two main downsides to it. It's really just a bit slow and tedious and time consuming sometimes if you're not getting enough volume in. And we can solve that by having more advanced games, and that does take a bit of time. A lot of guys, they think they understand Daygame, they understand cold approach, but when you have a surface level understanding of something and you don't necessarily know what you don't know, so let me explain. Like there are a lot of industries that I understand on a surface level, but if I speak to an expert in the field, they explain to me in depth things that I don't necessarily know about. And then I realize by speaking to an expert how little I actually do know. And so a lot of people with cold approach, they think in very surface level ways. I can go in extreme depth. One of the great analogies I remember hearing, I went to an Anthony Robbins live talk, and he talked about us in the West, we understand really only a couple of different types of ice. There's ice, the hard ice, and then there's kind of snow, really. That's really it. We don't really have a whole range of different ice or snows, right? But if you speak to an Eskimo, they have, 50 different types. The type that you can drink, the type that you can cook with, the type that you can I don't even know myself, but they have many different types of ice because they're experts in it and they spend a lot of time in the ice. They have multiple different textures and thicknesses, and they have a different name for all of the different types of ices, and they all have different purposes. But us in the West, we only have very surface level understanding because we only really have the ice out of the fridge. Maybe it's snowing outside. And we only really have a few different ways to differentiate it. And that is the same sort of analogy to describe not having a depth of understanding about Daygame. A lot of guys have a very simplistic way of looking at it, but when you get cold approach coaching with myself, I can go in depth like an Eskimo can, in depth, and have far more understanding like an Eskimo can with ice, different types of ices. And the same as when you speak to a scientist who's an expert in their field as well. They can go into depth into things that you didn't even know existed. And when you speak to an expert, you don't know what you don't know until you speak to an expert. And so if you're struggling with Daygame, doesn't matter how many years you've been doing it, there's ways to get around that, and that is by signing up and doing some coaching with myself. Cold approach coaching with an expert, so you can have a depth of understanding that most just don't have. So hopefully that makes sense. Check out the website, top link in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next video.